When did you secretly ruin someone's life behind their back? When they decided a baseball game was worth more than my daughter's life. I married Jennifer 3 months ago. She has a son named Mason, who's 14, the same age as my daughter Lily. Every single week I watch Jennifer treat Mason like the sun rises and sets with him, while Lily gets nothing. Mason gets the master bedroom upstairs, while she tries to demote Lily to the basement. Mason has new clothes for school while Lily wears hand-me-downs. When Mason has baseball practice, Jennifer leaves client meetings to drop him. But when Lily needs a ride to school, Jennifer's too busy making herself breakfast smoothies. I recently got employed after 2 years of daily job hunting, and I have to travel for work constantly. When I'm not home, Lily is treated like she's not family, and I can't do much about it. I was already planning a potential divorce when last Saturday happened. I was boarding a plane home from Chicago, 6 hours away from home, when I got a text from Marionette, Lily's friend's mom. "Hey, Lily just fell headfirst onto rocks at the lake house. It's bad. I'm at the hospital." My hands went cold. I called Marionette immediately. "What happened?" "She slipped on the dock. There's so much blood coming from her head. She threw up twice. The ER doctor says she needs a brain scan right away." "Where's Jennifer?" I asked. "I've been calling her for 20 minutes. She's not answering." I called Jennifer. I could hear crowds cheering in the background. "Jennifer, Lily's in the ER. It's serious. Can you go down to her?" "How serious is it?" she asked. "She's vomiting and bleeding from her head. They need to scan her brain." "Where are you?" "I'm at Mason's baseball tournament. It's the championship game. He's pitching." I felt my chest tighten. "Jennifer, Lily is in the emergency room. Doctors need you there." "I know, but the game just started. I'll come when it's over. It's only 90 minutes. 90 minutes? She'll be fine. Head wounds always look worse than they are." The hospital called me at 2:30. It was the doctor. "Mr. Harris, your daughter's CT scan shows a brain bleed. She needs emergency surgery immediately, but she's a minor. We need a guardian here in person to sign the consent forms before we operate. It's state law." "Can I not consent over phone?" I asked. "Sorry, sir, but with advancing AI developments, we cannot take over the phone consent anymore." I hung up and called Jennifer again. "What now?" "Lily has a brain bleed. She needs surgery now. The hospital needs you there to sign papers." There was a pause. I could hear an announcer over a loudspeaker. "I'm in the second inning. The game's almost halfway done." "Jennifer, she could die." "Then tell them to prep whatever they need to prep. I'll sign when I get there. Give me 60 minutes. 30 minutes? Mason worked all season for this. I'm not leaving." She hung up. Marionette called me crying at 2:55. "They won't do the surgery without an in-person signature. I tried fighting the doctor, but he says if he operates without consent, he loses his medical license. Lily's on the operating table right now, but they can't start." I tried Jennifer again. It went to voicemail. I called the hospital and begged them to do the surgery anyway. The doctor got on the phone. "Sir, I understand. But if I operate without guardian consent, I get sued. I lose everything. I have student loans and I have a family. I cannot risk my career." "My daughter is dying." "I know, and I'm very sorry, but we need that signature." At 3:25, Marionette sent me a screenshot. Jennifer had just posted on Instagram. The photo showed her and Mason holding a trophy, both eating ice cream cones. The caption said, "So proud. Championship win. He earned this." The location tag said they were still at the baseball complex. She was taking pictures while my daughter was bleeding in her brain. Jennifer finally walked into the hospital at 4:10, almost 2 hours after the CT scan. She signed the papers and they rushed Lily into surgery. I landed and immediately started speeding. By the time I got to the hospital at 8:30, the surgery was over. Jennifer had gone home. The surgeon sat me down. "We stopped the bleeding. Your daughter is alive, but there's permanent damage, severe memory problems. She'll have seizures. If we'd operated when the scan came back instead of waiting 2 hours, we could have prevented this." When Lily woke up the next day, she didn't remember the accident. She kept asking me the same questions over and over. 4 days later, I watched Lily have a seizure at breakfast. When she came to, she asked if she could have pancakes. She'd already eaten them 20 minutes before. That's when I opened my laptop. I wasn't just filing for divorce anymore. I was building a criminal negligence case, working with the best lawyers I could afford to put her in prison for 25 years. Jennifer thought choosing a baseball game over saving my daughter's life had no consequences, and I was about to show her how far a father will go when someone destroys his child. I sat in the hospital room watching Lily sleep. Her head was wrapped in white bandages. The machines next to her bed beeped every few seconds. I checked my phone. Wayne Bolton would be here in 45 minutes. I'd called him from the airport, found his number through a work friend who'd used him for a custody case. He specialized in criminal negligence. I needed someone who could make Jennifer pay for what she did. A nurse came in to check Lily's vitals. She smiled at me but didn't say anything. I could tell she knew what happened. The whole hospital probably knew by now. Jennifer signed the consent forms 2 hours late while my daughter's brain was bleeding. The nurse left and I went back to staring at Lily. She looked so small in the hospital bed. Her face was pale. There were dark circles under her eyes. This was supposed to be a fun weekend at the lake house with her friend. Now she had permanent brain damage. Wayne showed up exactly on time. He was maybe 50 years old, wearing a dark suit and carrying a leather briefcase. A hospital employee led him to the small consultation room down the hall. I met him there, shook his hand. He had a firm grip and looked me right in the eye. We sat down across from each other at a small table. Wayne pulled out a yellow legal pad and a pen. He got right to business. He explained that criminal negligence required proving Jennifer's actions showed complete disregard for Lily's life. It wasn't enough that she made a bad choice. The prosecutor would need to show she knew the danger and ignored it anyway. I nodded. I understood. Wayne asked me to walk him through everything. I started with the text from Marionette. I gave him exact times. The hospital called at 2:30. Jennifer was at the baseball game. I called her and she said she'd come when the game ended. The hospital called again. Lily needed emergency surgery right away. I called Jennifer back. She was still at the game. She said she'd be there in 60 minutes. I told Wayne about calling the hospital, begging them to operate anyway. The doctor said he couldn't without consent. He'd lose his license, get sued. I told Wayne about the Instagram post. Jennifer and Mason holding the trophy at 3:47, eating ice cream, and posting pictures while my daughter was on an operating table waiting for surgery she couldn't have. Wayne wrote everything down. He asked about Marionette. Could she testify about trying to reach Jennifer? I said yes. She'd already told me she would. Wayne asked about the doctor. Could he testify about the delay causing permanent damage? I said the surgeon told me directly that if they'd operated when the scan came back, Lily would have recovered fully. Wayne looked up from his notes. He said this was good evidence, but I needed to understand something. This wouldn't be quick. It wouldn't be easy. There was no guarantee criminal charges would even be filed. The prosecutor would need to believe they could prove beyond reasonable doubt that Jennifer's choice was criminal negligence and not just terrible judgment. A lot of people made bad decisions under stress. The prosecutor would have to convince a jury that staying at a baseball game while your stepdaughter needed emergency brain surgery crossed the line into criminal behavior. I felt my jaw tighten. I asked Wayne what our chances were. He said maybe 50-50 that charges get filed, maybe 30% chance of conviction if it went to trial. Juries were unpredictable. Jennifer's lawyer would paint her as a confused mother who didn't understand the severity. They'd bring up that she came to the hospital, that she signed the papers, that she didn't mean for this to happen. I looked at Wayne and told him I didn't care about the odds. I wanted Jennifer in prison. He nodded slowly and said he'd do everything he could. We talked for another 20 minutes about next steps. Wayne would compile all the evidence and present it to the district attorney's office. He'd get statements from Marionette and the doctor. He'd get the phone records showing when Jennifer was called and how many times. He'd get the Instagram post with the timestamp. He packed up his briefcase and left. I walked back to Lily's room. Jennifer was standing in the doorway. My whole body went rigid. She saw me and started walking toward Lily's bed like she had every right to be there. I moved fast and got between her and the door. I stood in the hallway blocking her path. She stopped. Her eyes were red. She'd been crying. She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. She started talking anyway. She said she didn't realize it was that serious. Head injuries always look worse than they are. She thought Lily would be fine. The hospital was being overly cautious. She didn't know about the brain bleed until after the game. I cut her off. I told her I'd already contacted a divorce attorney and a criminal lawyer. She needed to leave this hospital right now. Jennifer's face changed. First she looked defensive, then shocked, then angry. Her voice got louder. She said I was overreacting. Accidents happen. She made a mistake. She didn't deserve to have her entire life destroyed over one bad decision made under pressure. I stepped closer to her. I kept my voice low and steady. I told her the surgeon said the 2-hour delay caused permanent damage. If she'd signed the consent forms when the hospital first called, Lily would have recovered fully. Dr. Drew was willing to testify to that in court. Jennifer's face went pale. She put her hand against the wall. She said that couldn't be true. The doctor was just trying to cover himself. I told her it was true and she was going to face the consequences. She started raising her voice. She said she was Lily's legal guardian. She had a right to be here. A nurse came over and asked if everything was okay. I said Jennifer was leaving. Jennifer said she wasn't going anywhere. The nurse called security. 2 security guards showed up 3 minutes later. They asked Jennifer to leave. She refused. They told her she could leave voluntarily or be escorted out. She started crying and yelling about how this was her stepdaughter and she had rights. The security guards took her by the arms and walked her toward the elevator. Other nurses were watching. Some of them looked at me with sympathy. They'd clearly heard what happened. They understood why I didn't want Jennifer near Lily. I went back into Lily's room and sat in the chair next to her bed. My hands were shaking. That night around 8 o'clock, Lily woke up. She looked around the room confused. She asked me where she was. I told her she was in the hospital. She'd had an accident and needed surgery. She nodded and closed her eyes. 2 minutes later, she opened them again. She asked me where she was. I explained again about the accident and the surgery. She seemed to understand. 5 minutes later, she asked me the same question. Where was she? What happened? I had to explain it again. I watched her process the information like it was the first time she was hearing it. Her eyes got wide. She asked if she was going to be okay. I said yes, she was going to be okay. But I knew that wasn't really true. This was our life now. Lily asking the same questions over and over, forgetting the answers within minutes. All because Jennifer wanted to watch Mason's baseball game. The next morning, Dr. Drew came into Lily's room carrying a tablet and pulled up a chair next to my cot. He looked tired, but his voice stayed steady as he explained what we were facing. The memory problems might get a little better over the next few months, but they would probably never go away completely. Lily would need help remembering basic things for the rest of her life. The seizures were permanent, too. She would need to take medication every single day, and we would have to watch for triggers like stress or lack of sleep. He talked about follow-up appointments and brain scans and therapy sessions. I wrote everything down in my phone because I could barely process what he was saying. When he finished going through the medical stuff, he set down the tablet and looked at me directly. He said he heard I was building a legal case and he wanted to help. He would write a detailed statement explaining exactly how the 2-hour delay caused the extent of Lily's damage. He could testify that if surgery had started when the scan results came back, Lily would have recovered fully or close to it. His professional opinion carried weight in court, and he seemed genuinely angry about what Jennifer's choice had cost my daughter. I thanked him and he shook my hand before leaving. 5 days after the surgery, the hospital cleared Lily to go home. I packed up her things while a nurse went over the medication schedule and warning signs to watch for. Lily sat in the wheelchair looking confused about why we were leaving. I wheeled her down to the car and helped her into the passenger seat. The drive home took 20 minutes and she asked me 3 times where we were going. When we pulled into the driveway, I saw that I had already moved all of Jennifer's belongings to the garage the day before. I had changed the locks too. The house felt wrong now, like it was contaminated by what had happened here. Every room reminded me of Jennifer treating Lily like she didn't matter. I helped Lily inside and got her settled on the couch with her medications lined up on the coffee table. She looked around the living room and asked where Jennifer was. I sat down next to her and explained carefully that Jennifer and I were separating because of what happened at the hospital. Lily nodded, but I could see the foggy confusion in her eyes that now showed up in most of our conversations. She would forget this explanation within an hour, and I would have to tell her again. That evening, my phone rang and I saw Mason's name on the screen. I answered and heard his voice shaking as he asked if Lily was okay. I could hear Jennifer in the background telling him what to say. Her voice was muffled, but I caught phrases like, "Just ask about her health," and "Don't mention the game." I realized Jennifer was already trying to control what people knew about what happened. I told Mason gently that Lily had permanent brain damage because his mom chose to stay at his baseball game instead of coming to the hospital when the doctors called. Mason started crying on the other end of the line. He said he didn't know it was that serious. He said he would have told his mom to leave if he had known Lily could die. I heard Jennifer's voice get louder in the background. Then suddenly Jennifer grabbed the phone from Mason. She started yelling about how I was manipulating her son and turning him against her. I hung up without saying anything back. I immediately blocked her number. All future communication needed to go through lawyers now. 2 days later, Wayne called with an update. He had compiled enough evidence to present to the district attorney's office. He was requesting they consider charges of criminal negligence and child endangerment. He warned me the DA might see this as a civil matter instead of criminal, but he thought we had a strong case. The timeline evidence and Dr. Drew's medical statement were powerful. I felt something tight in my chest loosen slightly, knowing the case was moving forward. The divorce papers got served to Jennifer at her sister's house where she had been staying. Her attorney contacted my lawyer within hours. My lawyer called me that afternoon, and I could tell from his tone that Jennifer was planning to fight this aggressively. She was claiming she made a reasonable decision under pressure, and that I was overreacting. 3 days after we got home, Lily had her first seizure during breakfast. I was pouring orange juice when I heard a strange sound behind me. I turned and saw Lily's body go rigid in her chair. Then she started convulsing, her arms and legs jerking. I dropped the juice container and grabbed my phone to call 911. The operator talked me through what to do while I moved the chairs away so Lily wouldn't hit anything. The seizure lasted maybe 90 seconds, but it felt like forever. When it stopped, Lily went limp and her eyes stayed closed. The paramedics arrived 8 minutes later. They checked her vital signs and asked questions about her medications. They explained this was likely the new normal we had been warned about. The seizures would probably happen regularly despite the medication. They got Lily stabilized and awake. She looked around confused and asked what happened. I had to explain about the seizure. Then she asked if she could have breakfast. I looked at the table where her half-eaten pancakes sat on her plate. She had already eaten 20 minutes ago, but she had no memory of it. I grabbed my keys and drove Lily back to the emergency room. The waiting area was packed, but they took us back quickly when I explained about the seizure. A nurse checked Lily's vital signs while I filled out paperwork for the third time that week. The neurologist on duty came in 20 minutes later, a tired-looking woman who scrolled through Lily's chart on her tablet before examining her. She asked Lily basic questions about what day it was and where she lived. Lily got the day wrong and couldn't remember our address. The neurologist adjusted her seizure medication dosage and printed out new instructions. She sat down across from me and explained in a flat, matter-of-fact voice that Lily would probably have seizures for the rest of her life because of the brain damage. The medication might reduce the frequency, but wouldn't eliminate them completely. She recommended I install cameras in Lily's room to monitor her at night and never let her swim alone or take baths without supervision. I sat there taking notes while she listed all the ways my daughter's life was now permanently limited. We got home at 7 that evening, and I helped Lily into bed before opening my laptop to check work emails. My boss had sent 3 messages over the past 2 days asking about project deadlines and client meetings I'd missed. He said he understood about the family emergency, but needed to know when I'd be back in the office. I typed out a response explaining that Lily's condition required constant supervision and I needed to work from home for the foreseeable future. I hit send and stared at the screen, knowing this new job I'd fought so hard to get was now at risk. I'd been unemployed for 2 years before landing this position 3 months ago, and now I was facing the reality of being a single parent to a disabled child who couldn't be left alone for 5 minutes. The financial pressure sat heavy in my chest as I calculated medical bills and legal fees against my salary. I missed 2 more days of work that week dealing with follow-up appointments and another smaller seizure. My boss's emails got shorter and more formal, the concern in his tone shifting to something that felt like frustration. I knew I was putting my employment in danger, but I couldn't leave Lily alone, and I had no one else to help. Marionette showed up at my door on Thursday afternoon, carrying 2 grocery bags and a casserole dish. Her daughter, Lily's friend, stood behind her holding a backpack. I let them in, and Marionette immediately started unpacking food into my refrigerator while explaining she'd made extra meals this week. She pulled out containers of pasta and soup and homemade bread, stacking them neatly on the shelves. I thanked her and offered coffee, feeling grateful and exhausted at the same time. We sat at the kitchen table while the girls went upstairs to Lily's room. Marionette asked how Lily was doing, and I told her about the seizures and the memory problems and the neurologist's grim prognosis. She listened quietly, her face sad, and then she said she wanted to testify about everything she witnessed that day at the hospital. She said she'd been thinking about it constantly, about how she called Jennifer over and over while Lily was bleeding and Jennifer never answered. She said she tried to get the doctors to operate without consent, but they refused because of liability. She said she watched Lily lying there waiting for surgery that couldn't start because Jennifer chose to stay at a baseball game. I called Wayne that evening and told him about Marionette's offer to testify. He got excited immediately, his voice picking up energy as he explained why this mattered so much. Marionette was a neutral third party with no stake in our family drama, no reason to lie or exaggerate. Her testimony would show a pattern of Jennifer ignoring emergency calls and refusing to leave the game despite knowing the severity. Wayne said having an uninvolved witness who tried desperately to reach Jennifer would strengthen the negligence argument significantly. He asked me to have Marionette contact him directly to give a formal statement. I texted her his information and felt something like hope starting to build in my chest. The case was getting stronger with real evidence from credible witnesses. Jennifer's lawyer sent a letter to Wayne's office 3 days later. Wayne forwarded it to me with a short note saying we needed to discuss strategy. The letter claimed Jennifer was in a loud stadium environment during the championship game and couldn't hear her phone over the crowd noise. It said she came to the hospital as soon as she realized the severity of the situation and that any delay was unintentional and reasonable under the circumstances. Wayne called me after I'd read it, and we both agreed the Instagram post timeline contradicted this narrative completely. Jennifer hadn't just failed to hear her phone. She'd stayed at the baseball complex long enough to take celebration photos and post them on social media while knowing Lily needed emergency surgery. The letter was Jennifer's attempt to control the story before criminal charges got filed, but we had proof she was lying. 2 weeks after the incident, Lily asked if she could try going back to the school. She said she missed her friends and wanted things to feel normal again. I drove her to the middle school that morning, feeling anxious, but hoping maybe she could handle a few hours. The school counselor met us at the front entrance and walked Lily to her first class while I waited in the parking lot. The counselor called my cell phone 90 minutes later, asking me to come pick Lily up. I found her in the office crying, her face red and confused. The counselor explained that Lily got lost trying to find her locker between classes and forgot her schedule 3 times. A teacher had to walk her to each classroom. Then during lunch, Lily sat with her best friend Haley and had a panic attack when she couldn't remember Haley's name. She knew the girl's face and knew they were friends, but the name was just gone from her memory. Haley tried to help by showing Lily photos on her phone of them together, but it only made Lily more upset and scared. I took her home and she cried in the car about how nothing made sense anymore. The school counselor called me the next day to discuss accommodations. She said the school wanted to help, but Lily's needs were beyond what they could provide in a regular classroom setting. She suggested we consider homeschooling or enrolling Lily in a special education program designed for students with brain injuries. I listened to her talk about individualized learning plans and cognitive therapy while feeling my chest get tight. Lily had been a straight A student before the accident. She'd been planning to try out for the volleyball team and take advanced math. Now we were talking about special education and whether she could handle basic middle school classes. Jennifer's choice to watch a baseball game had altered my daughter's entire future. Every plan and possibility Lily had was gone, replaced by limitations and accommodations and lowered expectations. Wayne called me that same week with news about Jennifer's Instagram account. He'd been monitoring her social media as part of building the case and discovered she still had a public profile. He'd taken screenshots of the championship celebration post and noticed something crucial in the metadata. Jennifer had posted the photo at exactly 3:47 in the afternoon. The hospital's records showed they called her at 2:30, requesting immediate consent for surgery. That meant Jennifer stayed at the baseball complex for at least another hour and 15 minutes after being informed about the emergency. She didn't just fail to hear her phone in a loud stadium. She consciously chose to stay and celebrate Mason's win while knowing her stepdaughter needed emergency brain surgery. Wayne's voice was intense as he explained how devastating this timeline evidence was to Jennifer's defense. The proof was right there in the timestamps. Jennifer's lawyer could claim stadium noise all he wanted, but the Instagram post showed Jennifer standing there smiling and eating ice cream over an hour after the hospital called. She'd had time to watch the end of the game, participate in the trophy ceremony, buy ice cream, pose for photos, and post them online. All while Lily was on an operating table waiting for consent papers that Jennifer refused to sign. This wasn't confusion or miscommunication. This was a deliberate choice to prioritize a baseball game over a child's life. Wayne said this evidence alone could be enough to convince a prosecutor to file criminal charges. The timeline proved conscious disregard for Lily's safety. Wayne had been working with a prosecutor named Alicia Kavanaugh, who specialized in child welfare cases. He called me 2 days after discovering the Instagram evidence to say Alicia wanted to meet with us to review everything. We scheduled the meeting for the following Monday at the prosecutor's office downtown. Wayne said Alicia was tough and experienced, known for taking on difficult cases that other prosecutors might avoid. He thought she'd be sympathetic to pursuing charges given the evidence we had. I asked what charges we were looking at, and Wayne explained it would likely be reckless endangerment of a child and criminal negligence. If convicted, Jennifer could face up to 7 years in prison. I hung up the phone and sat in my kitchen thinking about Jennifer in a prison cell, about Mason losing his mother, about whether any amount of jail time would actually undo the damage to Lily's brain. The answer was no, but at least Jennifer would face real consequences for what she'd done. Monday morning, I drove downtown to the prosecutor's office for the meeting with Alicia. Wayne met me in the lobby, and we took the elevator to the 4th floor where Alicia had a small office with stacks of case files covering every surface. She was in her late 40s with short gray hair and sharp eyes that studied me carefully as we shook hands. Wayne spread out all the evidence on her desk while I sat in a hard plastic chair and watched her go through everything piece by piece. She started with the phone records showing exactly when the hospital called Jennifer and when Jennifer finally arrived. Then she looked at the Instagram post with its timestamp showing Jennifer stayed at the baseball complex for over an hour after being told about the emergency brain surgery. Alicia asked me direct questions about whether Jennifer seemed to understand the seriousness when I talked to her on the phone. I told her about hearing the announcer in the background and Jennifer saying the game was almost halfway done. Alicia wrote notes in careful handwriting and asked if Jennifer had any reason to think the hospital was making the situation sound worse than it actually was. I explained that Marionette had been calling Jennifer for 20 minutes before I even got involved, that multiple people were trying to reach her with emergency information. Wayne showed Alicia the medical records from Dr. Drew, stating clearly that the 2-hour delay caused permanent damage that would not exist if surgery had started immediately after the scan results. Alicia read through Drew's statement twice, her face getting harder each time. She asked about Lily's current condition, and I described the memory problems and seizures in detail. The meeting lasted almost 2 hours as Alicia went through every single piece of evidence and asked questions about anything that might weaken the case. She wanted to know if Jennifer had a history of neglecting Lily or if this was an isolated incident. I told her about the months of watching Jennifer treat Mason like royalty while Lily got nothing, but Wayne jumped in to say we should focus on the specific incident since the other stuff was harder to prove in court. Alicia finally leaned back in her chair and said she needed to review everything with her supervisor, but she believed there was enough evidence to consider filing charges. She warned me this could take months to move through the system, and that conviction was never guaranteed no matter how strong the evidence looked. But I could tell from the way she kept looking at Drew's medical statement that she was personally affected by what Jennifer's choice had cost my daughter. She said she would call Wayne within a week after talking to her supervisor and that I should prepare myself for a long legal battle. I left her office feeling drained, but also relieved that someone in authority was taking this seriously. 3 days later, I was at home taking a shower when I heard a loud crash from the hallway. My stomach dropped and I jumped out still dripping wet and ran to find Lily collapsed on the bathroom floor. She was having another seizure, her body rigid and shaking, and there was blood on the tile from where her head had hit the edge of the sink. I grabbed towels and got down next to her, turning her on her side like the doctors had taught me, and watching the clock to time how long the seizure lasted. It felt like forever, but was actually only 90 seconds before her body relaxed and she went limp. The cut on her forehead was small, just a scrape really, but seeing her lying there unconscious with blood on her face made my hands shake so badly I could barely dial for help. The paramedics came and checked her over, saying the new injury was not serious, but I needed to make sure she was never alone even for a minute. After they left, I sat on the bathroom floor next to Lily's bed and realized my traveling job was completely impossible now. I could not leave her alone for even 5 minutes without risking another fall, another injury, another trip to the emergency room. The next morning, I called my boss and asked if we could talk about my work situation. He was understanding when I explained about Lily's seizures and the need for constant supervision. We discussed options and he offered to let me transition to a fully remote position where I would not have to travel anymore. The catch was a significant pay reduction since the travel had been a major part of my job responsibilities. I did the math in my head while we talked and realized the pay cut would be almost 30% of my current salary. But I had no choice because Lily's safety had to come first. I accepted the remote position and thanked him for being flexible. After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table with a calculator and started figuring out our new financial reality. The legal fees for the criminal case were already piling up, even though we had barely started. Wayne's retainer alone had been $5,000, and he said a case like this could easily cost $20,000 to $30,000 before it was over. Then there were Lily's ongoing medical expenses, the seizure medications that cost hundreds of dollars a month, the therapy sessions with specialists, the special tutoring she needed now. I added up all the numbers and felt sick looking at how little would be left over each month. The pay cut meant I would be barely scraping by, and any unexpected expense could push us into real financial trouble. But what choice did I have when my daughter needed me home to keep her safe? 2 days after accepting the remote position, my phone rang with a number I did not recognize. I answered and heard Jennifer's sister asking if we could talk. Her voice was shaky, and she started by saying she knew I was angry, but she wanted me to understand how much Jennifer was suffering. She said Jennifer was falling apart with guilt and having panic attacks every day thinking about what happened. Then she begged me to drop the criminal complaint and just handle everything through divorce court instead. She said Jennifer made one mistake under pressure and did not deserve to go to prison and have her whole life destroyed. I felt my jaw clench as I listened to her make excuses for someone who chose a baseball game over my daughter's brain surgery. When she finally stopped talking, I told her about finding Lily on the bathroom floor after her seizure 3 days ago. I described watching my daughter ask me the same questions over and over because her memory was so damaged she could not retain information for more than a few minutes. I told her what the neurologist said about this damage being permanent, about Lily needing medication and supervision for the rest of her life. Jennifer's sister started crying on the phone and tried to say something, but I kept going. I said Jennifer had a choice that day at the baseball complex, and she chose wrong, and now Lily would pay the price forever, while Jennifer got to walk around free. Her sister was sobbing by the time I finished, and she hung up without saying anything else. I felt bad for about 10 seconds before remembering that Jennifer was the one who caused all of this, not me. Wayne called me on a Friday afternoon with news that made my hands go cold. He said Alicia had met with her supervisor, and they had decided to file criminal charges against Jennifer. She was charged with reckless endangerment of a child and criminal negligence, two serious charges that could result in up to 7 years in prison if she was convicted on both. Wayne explained that reckless endangerment covered the choice to stay at the game despite knowing about the emergency, while criminal negligence covered the failure to act when she had a duty to protect Lily as her legal guardian. The charges would be filed officially on Monday, and Jennifer would be arrested within a few days after that. I thanked Wayne and hung up, then sat staring at my kitchen wall trying to process what I felt. Part of me was satisfied that Jennifer would finally face real consequences for what she did. But another part felt exhausted thinking about the months of legal proceedings ahead, the court dates and testimonies and media attention. This was just the beginning of a long battle that would drain me financially and emotionally, while I was also trying to take care of Lily and work my new remote job. I wanted justice, but I was already so tired. Jennifer was arrested on a Tuesday morning at her sister's house. Wayne called to tell me it had happened and that she was processed at the county jail downtown. She posted bail within 3 hours, her family apparently pooling money to get her out quickly. By that evening, her mugshot was all over the local news websites, with a story about the mother who stayed at a baseball game while her stepdaughter needed emergency brain surgery. The article included quotes from the police report and mentioned that authorities had been investigating for weeks before filing charges. I did not read the comments section because I knew it would be full of people arguing about whether Jennifer deserved prison or sympathy. My phone started buzzing with texts from people I had not heard from in months, everyone suddenly wanting to know if the story was true and if I was okay. The news stations picked up the story 3 days after Jennifer's arrest. It was just a short segment on the local evening broadcast, maybe 90 seconds long, but it included Jennifer's mugshot and a brief summary about the baseball game delay. The reporter mentioned the brain damage and showed a photo of the baseball complex where Jennifer stayed while Lily was bleeding. I didn't watch the segment myself, but my neighbor texted me a link to the station's website where they posted it. Within hours, people started recognizing me at the grocery store. I took Lily to pick up her seizure medication at the pharmacy, and the woman behind the counter stared at us for too long before processing the prescription. At Lily's school, other parents looked at me with these sad, pitying expressions when I dropped her off. Some of them whispered to each other while watching us walk to the entrance. And a few approached me in the parking lot to say they were sorry about what happened, that they couldn't imagine going through something like this. I thanked them and got back in my car as quickly as possible. The attention made my skin crawl. I didn't want sympathy or pity. I wanted my daughter to be healthy again, and no amount of kind words from strangers would fix what Jennifer broke. Lily noticed the stares too. She asked me why people kept looking at us funny, and I had to explain that some people knew about her accident. She nodded and forgot the conversation 20 minutes later, when she asked me the same question again. 4 days after the news coverage, someone knocked on my door at 7 in the evening. I looked through the peephole and saw Mason standing on my porch. His bike was lying on its side in my front yard. His face was red and blotchy, and I could tell he'd been crying. I opened the door and he just stood there looking at me with these devastated eyes. He tried to say something but started crying harder instead. I stepped aside and let him in. He followed me to the kitchen and sat down at the table while I got him a glass of water. He drank half of it in one gulp and wiped his face with his sleeve. He told me he rode his bike 3 miles to get here because his aunt wouldn't drive him and his mom was staying with his grandmother. He said he was sorry, that he didn't know what was happening at the hospital, that he felt like this was his fault for playing in the championship game. His voice kept breaking and he had to stop talking several times to catch his breath. I sat down across from him and waited for him to finish. When he finally looked up at me, I could see how much guilt he was carrying. This 14-year-old kid thought he was responsible for his mother's choices. I told him carefully that none of this was his fault. He was playing baseball, exactly what he should have been doing. His mom made her own decisions that day, and those decisions had nothing to do with him pitching in a championship game. He was a kid playing sports, and he had no control over what his mother chose to do when the hospital called. I explained that his mother could have left the game at any point. She could have signed the papers and gone back to watch him pitch. She could have asked another parent to record the game on their phone. She had options and she made her choices. Those choices belonged to her, not to him. Mason listened and nodded, but I could tell he didn't fully believe me yet. The guilt was too fresh, too heavy. He asked if he could see Lily. I hesitated for a second, knowing what he was about to witness, but I figured maybe seeing her would help him understand this wasn't about him. I took him upstairs to Lily's room. She was sitting at her desk with a tutor I hired to help her keep up with schoolwork. The tutor was going over basic math problems, the kind Lily used to solve in seconds. Now she stared at them like they were written in a foreign language. When we walked in, Lily's face lit up. She smiled big and started to stand up from her chair. Then she looked at Mason with this confused expression and asked who he was. The tutor glanced at me with sympathy. Mason's smile disappeared. He told Lily it was him, Mason, her stepbrother. Lily tilted her head and said she didn't have a stepbrother. I stepped in, and gently reminded her that Mason was Jennifer's son, that they'd lived in the same house for 3 months before the accident. She squinted at him like she was trying really hard to remember, but I could see the moment she gave up. She apologized and said she couldn't remember him. Mason's face crumpled. He tried to smile and told her it was okay, that maybe they could hang out for a bit and she'd remember. Lily agreed happily and asked the tutor if they could take a break. The tutor packed up her materials and left us alone. Mason sat on Lily's bed and tried talking to her about things they'd done together before the accident. He mentioned the time they played video games in the basement, the morning they made pancakes together when I was traveling for work. Lily listened politely, but nothing registered. She kept apologizing for not remembering, and each apology made Mason look more devastated. After about 40 minutes, Lily asked Mason what his name was again. That's when I saw it truly hit him. His mother's choice to stay at that baseball game had destroyed Lily's brain so badly that she couldn't even remember the people she'd lived with. He stayed for another 20 minutes, but the conversation became awkward and painful. When he finally said he needed to go home, Lily told him it was nice to meet him, and maybe they could hang out again sometime. Mason nodded and followed me downstairs. At the front door, he looked at me with tears running down his face. He didn't say anything else. He just got on his bike and rode away into the dark. I watched him disappear down the street and felt terrible for him. He was just a kid caught in the middle of his mother's terrible decisions, and now he had to carry the weight of seeing exactly what those decisions cost. 2 weeks later, Wayne called to tell me Jennifer's lawyer had filed a motion to dismiss the criminal charges. The motion argued that the state couldn't prove Jennifer's actions rose to the level of criminal negligence. Her lawyer claimed Jennifer made a parenting decision under stress, that she believed the hospital was overreacting, and that her choice to finish watching the game didn't constitute criminal behavior. Wayne said it was a standard defense move, nothing unexpected. Alicia filed a response within 3 days. Wayne sent me a copy of her response document. It was 15 pages of detailed arguments citing the timeline evidence, the multiple phone calls Jennifer ignored, the Instagram post showing she was celebrating while Lily waited for surgery, and Dr. Drew's medical statement explaining how the 2-hour delay directly caused preventable brain damage. Alicia's response was thorough and aggressive. She argued that Jennifer's choice to stay at a baseball game after being told her stepdaughter needed emergency brain surgery showed such extreme indifference to human life that it absolutely constituted criminal negligence. The judge would review both motions and make a decision at the preliminary hearing. Wayne called me again a few days after that to tell me the preliminary hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks out. He started preparing me for what to expect. I would need to testify about the phone calls, the exact timeline of events, and what the doctors told me about Lily's condition. Wayne warned me that Jennifer's lawyer would try to make me look emotional and unreliable on the stand, that I needed to stay calm and stick to facts. He also said Lily might need to be evaluated by the court to establish the extent of her injuries. A court-appointed doctor would examine her and test her memory and cognitive function. The results would become evidence showing exactly what Jennifer's delay cost. I agreed to everything Wayne suggested. I wanted the judge to see clearly what Jennifer did and what it caused. The 6 weeks waiting for the hearing were brutal. Lily's memory issues created daily heartbreaks that never got easier to witness. She would forget conversations we had an hour ago. I'd tell her about an appointment or a plan for the day, and 60 minutes later she'd ask me what we were doing. She lost track of whether she'd eaten. I'd make her lunch and she'd eat it, then 20 minutes later ask if it was time for lunch yet. Sometimes she didn't recognize her own bedroom. She'd walk in and look around confused, asking whose room this was. The tutor reported that Lily was retaining almost nothing from their sessions. They'd work on a math concept for an hour, and the next day Lily would have zero memory of learning it. They had to start over constantly. The tutor suggested we might need to consider a special education program designed for kids with traumatic brain injuries. I knew she was right, but accepting it felt like another loss. Brianna started working with Lily twice a week. She was a therapist who specialized in pediatric brain injury cases. She was realistic about Lily's limitations from the first session. She told me directly that Lily's memory problems were permanent and wouldn't significantly improve. But she could help Lily develop coping strategies to function better within those limitations. She taught Lily to keep detailed notes about everything. She got Lily a special notebook where she wrote down important information, conversations, things she needed to remember. Brianna also helped Lily set up phone reminders for everything from taking medication to eating meals to brushing her teeth. She showed Lily how to take photos throughout the day so she could look back and remember what she did. The strategies helped somewhat. Lily started checking her notebook constantly and following her phone reminders. She still forgot things and got confused, but the tools gave her some structure to hold on to. I started attending a support group for parents of children with traumatic brain injuries. It met every Thursday evening at a community center downtown. The first night I went, I sat in a circle with 8 other parents who understood exactly what I was going through. They shared stories about their kids' injuries and the daily challenges of caring for someone with permanent brain damage. Hearing their experiences helped me feel less alone. One father whose daughter was injured in a car accident 5 years ago gave me practical advice about managing the daily challenges. He told me to take photos of everything so Lily could review her day. He suggested labeling drawers and cabinets so Lily could find things more easily. He warned me about the emotional toll of watching my daughter struggle and encouraged me to find my own therapist to process everything. His advice was specific and useful in ways that generic sympathy from strangers never could be. That Thursday evening after the support group, I got home and opened my laptop to check email when I saw a notification that Jennifer's sister had tagged me in a Facebook post. I clicked it and felt my stomach turn. Jennifer's entire family had launched a coordinated social media campaign across Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Her sister posted a long essay about how Jennifer was a devoted mother who made one terrible mistake in a moment of confusion and panic. The post had dozens of photos attached, showing Jennifer with Mason and Lily from before the incident. There were pictures of Jennifer helping Lily with homework, Jennifer and Lily baking cookies together, Jennifer braiding Lily's hair. The caption read that Jennifer loved both kids equally and was being unfairly vilified for a tragic accident. Jennifer's mother shared the same photos with her own caption about how her daughter was destroyed by a vindictive ex-husband who wanted revenge. Jennifer's brother posted a video talking about how Jennifer had been crying for weeks with guilt and didn't deserve to go to prison. Within hours, the post had hundreds of shares and comments from people I'd never met, all saying Jennifer was treated too harshly. Some comments said I was using my daughter's injury to punish Jennifer for wanting a divorce. Others said the hospital should be blamed for their consent policy, not Jennifer. I felt rage building as I scrolled through post after post painting Jennifer as a victim. My phone rang and it was Wayne. He'd seen the social media campaign too because Jennifer's lawyer had apparently sent him links. Wayne told me directly to stay off social media entirely and not respond to any of Jennifer's family's posts. He explained that the court case would be decided on evidence, not public opinion, and engaging in online arguments would only hurt our credibility. Wayne said prosecutors hate it when their witnesses get into social media fights because it makes them look emotional and unreliable. He told me to block Jennifer's family members, turn off notifications, and focus on preparing my testimony for the preliminary hearing. I followed his advice and blocked everyone, but I kept seeing screenshots friends would send me of new posts Jennifer's family made. 3 weeks later, the preliminary hearing arrived, and I sat in the courthouse waiting room with Wayne, going over my testimony one more time. He reminded me to stick to facts, answer only what was asked, and stay calm no matter what Jennifer's lawyer said. We walked into the courtroom, and I saw Jennifer sitting at the defense table with her attorney. She looked small and sad, wearing a conservative dress and minimal makeup. Her family members filled the front rows behind her, all watching me with hostile expressions. The judge called the hearing to order, and Alicia stood up to present the state's case. She gave a brief opening statement explaining the charges and what evidence would show. Then she called me as the first witness. I walked to the stand and got sworn in, my hands shaking slightly as I placed them on the Bible. Alicia asked me to describe the timeline of events on the day of Lily's injury. I walked through receiving Marionette's text, calling Jennifer at the baseball game, the hospital calling about the brain bleed, Jennifer refusing to leave. I testified about the Instagram post timestamp showing Jennifer was still at the baseball complex, celebrating an hour and 15 minutes after being told about the emergency surgery. I described finding Lily seizing at breakfast 4 days after the surgery, her asking for pancakes she'd already eaten. Jennifer sat at the defense table crying quietly, dabbing her eyes with tissues. I had to remind myself that her tears didn't change what she did, that Lily was the one who suffered permanent damage. Jennifer's lawyer didn't cross-examine me, probably saving his questions for trial. Alicia called Marionette next, and she walked to the stand looking nervous but determined. Marionette testified about taking Lily to the hospital after the dock accident, about the blood and vomiting. She described calling Jennifer over and over while Lily was getting her CT scan, leaving voicemails and texts that went unanswered. She testified about the panic at the hospital when they couldn't get consent for surgery, about begging the doctor to operate anyway. Marionette's voice stayed calm and steady throughout her testimony. She didn't embellish or exaggerate, just stated exactly what happened. I could see the judge taking careful notes during her testimony, his expression serious. Jennifer's lawyer asked Marionette a few questions about whether she actually saw Jennifer's phone or knew for certain Jennifer heard the calls. Marionette said no, she couldn't know that, but she made over 20 attempts to reach Jennifer during the 2-hour period. Dr. Drew testified next about the medical evidence. He explained Lily's CT scan results, the brain bleed location and severity, the surgery procedure. Then he stated in clear terms how the 2-hour delay in surgery directly caused the extent of Lily's brain damage. Drew said that if surgery had begun when the scan results came back at 2:30, Lily would likely have recovered fully with minimal or no permanent effects. He explained that brain bleeds require immediate intervention because every minute of delay allows more damage to occur. The judge leaned forward, listening intently as Drew described the medical timeline. Jennifer's lawyer stood up for cross-examination and immediately went aggressive. He tried to suggest that Drew couldn't know for certain what would have happened with earlier surgery, that maybe Lily would have had complications anyway. Drew held firm, citing medical literature and his 20 years of experience with similar cases. He said that while no medical outcome is guaranteed, the evidence strongly supported that prompt surgery would have prevented the memory damage and seizures. Jennifer's lawyer pushed harder, asking if Drew had ever seen cases where early surgery still resulted in complications. Drew acknowledged yes, but said those cases involved different injury patterns than Lily's. The cross-examination lasted 30 minutes, but Drew never wavered or got defensive. When both sides rested, the judge took 10 minutes to review his notes. Then he ruled there was sufficient evidence for the case to proceed to trial and denied the defense motion to dismiss. Jennifer started crying harder as the judge set a trial date for 4 months out. Her family members in the courtroom looked devastated, some of them crying too. I felt a grim satisfaction leaving the courthouse, finally seeing Jennifer face real consequences. But Wayne reminded me on the courthouse steps that this was just the preliminary hearing. The actual trial would be much harder, he said, and there was still no guarantee of conviction. The judge had only ruled there was enough evidence to proceed, not that Jennifer was guilty. Over the next 4 months, life settled into a difficult routine that became our new normal. I managed Lily's medical appointments every week, sometimes twice a week when she needed medication adjustments or seizure monitoring. I worked from home at my reduced salary, taking calls and doing projects while keeping an eye on Lily. I spent evenings preparing for trial with Wayne, going over testimony and evidence. And I watched my daughter struggle with tasks that used to be effortless for her. Lily couldn't remember her daily schedule without checking her phone constantly. She forgot conversations we'd had that same morning. She needed reminders to brush her teeth, take her medication, eat meals. But slowly, with Brianna's help, Lily started making small improvements. Brianna taught her to check her phone constantly for reminders she'd set throughout the day. She got Lily keeping a detailed journal where she wrote down everything that happened each day, what she ate, who she talked to, how she felt. Brianna showed Lily how to take photos of important things so she could look back and remember. The strategies helped Lily function better within her limitations. She'd never be the same as before the injury, but she was developing ways to work around her memory problems and manage her daily life. Mason started showing up at the house every other weekend after that first visit. Jennifer called me screaming the first time, saying I was turning her son against her, but Mason kept coming anyway. He'd sit with Lily for hours, playing the same card games over and over, never getting frustrated when she forgot the rules 5 minutes after he explained them. He brought photos from their childhood when they first met, showing them to her repeatedly until something clicked. Now when Mason walks through the door, Lily's face lights up and she says his name without hesitation. He's one of maybe 3 people she recognizes consistently, and it's because he shows up every single week without fail, rebuilding their connection through pure repetition and patience. The trial started on a Tuesday morning in February, exactly 10 months after the accident. I walked into the courthouse at 8 in the morning and saw Jennifer's entire family packed into the benches behind the defense table. Her sister glared at me. Her parents looked old and tired. A handful of reporters sat in the back row with notebooks. I took my seat behind Alicia at the prosecutor's table, my hands shaking as the bailiff called the court to order. The weight of everything that led to this moment pressed down on my chest. Alicia stood for opening statements and laid out the case in clear, simple terms. Jennifer received multiple emergency phone calls about her stepdaughter's brain bleed. She was told Lily needed immediate surgery. She stayed at a baseball game for another hour and 15 minutes, long enough to watch the trophy presentation and post celebration photos on social media. By the time she arrived at the hospital to sign consent forms, the delay had caused permanent brain damage that doctors confirmed was preventable. Stewart got up next and painted Jennifer as a confused mother in a chaotic situation who made a terrible error in judgment. He said she didn't understand the severity, because head injuries always seem worse than they are. He said she came as soon as she grasped the seriousness. He asked the jury to see this as a tragic accident, not a crime. The trial lasted 8 days. Medical experts testified about brain bleeds and surgery timing. Marionette described her frantic phone calls to Jennifer. Dr. Drew explained exactly how the 2-hour delay caused the specific damage Lily now lives with. The defense brought their own experts who suggested maybe Lily would have had complications anyway, though their testimony felt weak compared to Drew's certainty. Jennifer took the stand on day 6 and cried through her entire testimony, insisting she thought the hospital was overreacting, that she planned to leave but the game was almost over, that she never imagined this would happen. The jury went out to decide on day 8 and came back 6 hours later. Guilty of reckless endangerment, not guilty on the criminal negligence charge. The judge sentenced her to 18 months in prison, followed by 3 years probation. I sat there feeling this weird mix of satisfaction and emptiness, like I'd won something but it wasn't enough to fix what got broken. I drove Lily home from the courthouse and she asked me 3 times what happened today. Each time I explained patiently that the person who hurt her was being held accountable. That night I sat in her room watching her sleep, her medication bottles lined up on the nightstand in perfect rows. This is our life now. Not the vindication I imagined during those first angry weeks, but something more complicated and permanent. Lily will never be the same. Jennifer will serve her time and eventually walk free. I'll spend the rest of my life helping my daughter navigate a world that became infinitely harder because someone chose a baseball game over her brain surgery. But when Lily stirs in her sleep and smiles at me without waking, I know we'll find our way through this together, one day and one memory at a time.